One. Good afternoon,
Hi
Frank.
everyone. Hi everyone. I'm Frank Forza. This is my good friend Noah Green. We're back for another episode of Everyman BJJ. Noah, we've been on a tear lately. We just ripped these out. Masters of improvisation, masters of spontaneity. I was telling you off air that I had a pretty adventurous Monday. It did not go as planned. So my plan today was I wake up, I go through my whole routine, I get my tea, I set my intentions, I pray, I do some writing. Sometimes I'll listen to some music or some kind of like some mantras, that sort of thing. Anyway, I was like, today there's a really good park that's like five miles away. So I've got my cycle. I mean, I'll cycle out there. It's 8:30 in the morning, no big deal. It's 8:30 in the morning. I'll go, work out in the park, do the bands, run some sprints, do some bear crawls, do some alligator crawls, do some shadow boxing, do some stretching, feeling good. And then I'll get out of the sun maybe around 11 a.m., right? So, my skin has worked up to the sun. I don't do sunscreen. So I'm thinking 2.5 hours, 3 hours, it should be good. So I'm on my way, Noah. I'm cycling out there, beautiful morning, and I get to a construction zone. We've got construction zones all over here in Utah where I am. I'm sure you've got plenty there in Las Vegas. And so, it's inconvenient. They're blocking the road. I've got to
Mm-hmm.
take the sidewalk. I go like 5-6 blocks, and then and I'm having to walk some of it just to not get hit by a car. And so finally I jump back on my bike. I ride for a little bit, maybe a block. And then I get this feeling like, wait, is that gravel? Is this just a really gravelly road, or am I riding on rim? Right. So get off the bike, and then I look down and I'm checking the tires, and I can see all these thorns, so many thorns in the back tire. So I'm like, well, okay, just because there's thorns, that doesn't mean they necessarily punctured. That doesn't mean that I'm losing air per se. So I start to prick you got to be careful. I start to pull the thorns out. Like they're these little, they almost have like a shell, and then they have a horn. They're just really disastrous for your bike. Anyway, I pull the first one out, and I can hear the
Oh
man,
no.
I shouldn't have pulled that one out. So then, like an idiot, I pull another one out. So that air, I'm like, well, I'm losing air by the second. So then I don't have a fix, a flat fixer with me like I should. And then I look to the front tire. The front tire is completely flat. There were so many thorns all throughout my tire. So I was probably about 8-9 blocks from the park. And this is applicable for the kind of things we talk about with jiu-jitsu, right? Life, you're going to wake up, you're going to have a plan, you're going to have this list of things. I make my list the night before, I redo my list the morning of. Sometimes I revise my list the day of, right? And so we make these lists, and then life happens. And this wasn't terrible, Noah. It's not like I got a phone call, right? We could all get a really bad phone call. Somebody we loved, something happened, right? There's worse news in the world to get than to just look down and see not one, but two flat. I've never had two flat tires simultaneous, right? So I've got two flat tires. I'm like, well, I've got almost a mile to walk to there. So what I did, and I made this one a couple years, Noah, ago, about 8 years ago. This was a very pivotal moment in my life. I was going through my divorce. I was getting older as an athlete. The injuries were starting to rack up. Someone that I loved had a very serious ailment. They were dealing with something very serious. And there were a couple times where I would start to cry. I mean, I would sit in my car, this person that I loved a lot, and I might think about it. And I remember one time I was of all places, I was in an Arby's parking lot, right? So it's like I can remember, because I don't have the habit of crying. I'm not a cry easy kind of guy. I've seen a lot of things in life. I am sensitive. I am very sentimental. I do have a heart. I do feel things. I'm very passionate and very exuberant, but I'm not too big in the whole cry thing. So I'm sitting in that Arby's parking lot. I'm thinking, this is a nightmare. This won't go away. This person I love is having a lot of problems. And then I'm crying at the level now too of at that level of cry. I'm not just crying tears. I'm crying where you're almost hyperventilating, right? So you're having your nervous system, your parasympathetic system is having a very strong response to that. I'm feeling that very deeply. And at the end of the cry, I thought of something a friend of mine said to me. Her daughter had been in a coma for 6 months. They live in Las Vegas. Incredible family. Risa Berlin. Daughter Dana Berlin was driving home. I was a reporter for the Review Journal. And one night I was in a grocery store, and I had always wanted to do a story about somebody who woke up from a coma. I was always like, man, you know what would be a great story? Would be somebody who was in a coma and then woke up, and then what do they remember? Like, how do they piece together their life again, right? Like the process of what can you remember? What don't you remember? How do you rediscover yourself and who you are? And so I'd always had that in the back of my mind, like as a journalist, like I'd love that story. So it's midnight in Las Vegas in Summerlin, out in the suburbs. I'm in a Smith's grocery store because they're open 24/7. And the lady, two people in front of me, is talking to the cashier. She's like 50 years old. And she's like, my daughter, Dana, just woke up from this coma after 6 months in this coma. And she said this and this and this. And I was just like, my ears just got big. I got nosy, right? I was like, whoa, are you kidding me? So I said, hey, wait. I'm going to, you pay for your stuff. I'm going to pay in a second. And can I talk to you? She said, sure. She does her transaction. I wait. I do my transaction. I start talking to her about her daughter, homecoming night. Beautiful girl, 17 years old. Someone runs a red light, homecoming night. That girl's in a car with friends. Someone runs a red light. Boom. Car gets T-boned. Dana Berlin, beautiful girl, homecoming night. Her head is the size of a basketball, balloons up, edema, swelling. Parents get that phone call. They spend 6 months at her bedside. She's in a coma. Some of the doctors are like, look, she's not going to make it. And if she does make it, she's going to be a vegetable. So if you're smart, you're just, there were doctors that were like, hint, hint, nod, nod. She's going to be a vegetable. You should probably basically just medically let her die. And that was not their family's wish. That was not their desire. They were like, no, we will do everything we can. And I remember something Risa Berlin told me. This applies to everybody out there. Risa Berlin had a rule, because a lot of Dana Berlin was 17 years old, very popular, had a lot of friends. A lot of her friends would come to the hospital and visit her while she was in the coma. And they would talk to her, and they would say, we love you. And they would play music. And they would, the parents believed in like positive energy, even if you were in a coma, even if you were in a deep sleep, a deep subconscious state. But they did have, the Berlin family had one rule when you came in there for the hospital. And the one rule was, you're not allowed to cry at Dana's bedside. You're not allowed to cry. And there were people who came in to that hospital to see Dana Berlin, to wish her well, and they couldn't take what they saw, her with all the tubes, her body the way it was, her brain and everything, the swelling. They couldn't take it. Her close friends, and some of them started crying, and the Berlin family had to usher them out of the room. Look, you can go back in, but you have to collect yourself. We don't want that energy around her. We believe that still influences her. So when I was going back to my thing at Arby's, I had written that story about the Berlin family. I spent a year with them. I wrote a story for the Las Vegas Review Journal newspaper, a front page story. And here I am at Arby's. I'm going through my own thing, and I'm crying. I'm having that crying. And so I cry it out, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, wait, this is not going to go away. And I remembered Risa Berlin's no cry rule. I remember that. And I thought, Frank, you're not going to cry anymore. If crying will help the situation, then you can cry. If crying helps the situation, same with complaining. If complaining helps the situation, I highly recommend people out there complain. If it helps, it usually doesn't. If crying helps the situation, I say cry away. Even if it helps you just grieving, cry away. If it's not really helping the situation, right, for whatever reason. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to cry my way out of this thing, and I wasn't going to be able to. So it was a very rare day when I cried. I still felt a lot of emotions. I still did what I could. I still looked high and low for solutions to help this person that I loved. But I remembered Risa Berlin's no cry rule. And anyway, so today what I'm saying is you can get way worse news. Like the day I got the news of that loved one, the day that Dana Berlin's parents got a call that, at 3 in the morning, 2 in the morning, hey, is this your daughter? And there's way worse news than I got 2 flats, right? But no. So I get these 2 flats. I walk, I do my workout. I'm getting tons of sun, and I'm thinking, well, I could Uber it back because I'm like 6 miles from the nearest. Let's get some, new tires and put tires in. I'm like, you know what? You're a granola guy. You got a hippie streak in you, Frank. Just go and like, walk home. It'll be good. You'll get something good to eat. I need a new backpack. My backpack's fraying. I'm like, whatever. Your skin handles the sun pretty good. No, the one thing I didn't plan on, it wasn't the walk. Okay, so I walked like between cycling and walking. I did 11 miles of that. I did over 3 hours in the park, running sprints, shadow boxing, bear crawls, the jacare alligator crawls, functional movement, like almost 26, 27 sets of band work, intense band work. Kids stop by and are like, hey, show me these bands. What I did was I was able to be in the moment. I was able to get to that park and stay in the moment and forget about those flat tires. The whole time I was there, the 3 hours, Noah, under the sun, I enjoyed it. Every once in a while, I had some music. I had kids come up to me and they were playful and I was showing them stuff. And so I was able, like you're supposed to, like the martial arts teach you, to compartmentalize and say, you know what? We're going to deal with that tire. We'll deal with how to get home in the hot sun. We'll deal with that. We'll deal with fixing the tire later, the $70 now to fix the tire. And I've just already fixed 4 other tires in the last 4 months. So here we go, more tires. But we'll deal with that later. We're in the sun. Body still works. Voice still works. Eye still works. Energy's flowing, feeling good. And I did that, right? So I had a great workout. But then I went, I had this great workout. And then I was like, okay, let's head back, right? Didn't have enough water. So I'm Mr. Hey, take the sun and no sunscreen. But I tell you what, it was getting kind of dangerous for me, at least. Now that's what I'm getting to, is like how dark I look here. And like, I had to be really careful. And I basically took like a do-rag. I had my shirt. So I had to go buy a shirt. I had to buy this shirt because I'm like, you cannot have all this sun exposure for 8-9 hours on you. You cannot. It's going to be 90 some degrees here today. You can't do that. So I had to buy another shirt, and I took my tank top shirt, put it over my head, and put my hat, and I was like, wow, I don't want to get like really, really, really burned and be stupid. Like I didn't plan on that. So just to show you with the mind jitsu, life jitsu, the jujitsu of life, there were things that happened that wasn't the worst day. I was able to think about some cool things on the way home and think about our podcast and plan out the rest of 2020. I was able to, I bumped into some coconut juice and aloe vera juice that's 100% both, which I'd never seen that. It happened to be selling that where I went to get the shirt. So I was like, wow, maybe I'll experiment with that. So some good came of it, but the bad thing was I was messing with that sun, man, and I'm a big fan of the sun, but I was like, wow, be careful what you wish for, buddy, because you can get burned, you can get scorched out here, And so I realized why some of those guys in the city and everything, why they wear some of them wear because they want wavy hair, and some of my buddies that are black, they can put those caps on to get wavy hair, but also if you're dealing with the sun, man, it gives you good cover for your face, your neck. So anyway, I have another story. I've talked way too long-winded. I'm going to turn the mic over to you, Noah, your thoughts, your day. But I have a follow-up story for everybody out there. You're going to want to wait. You're going to want to listen to this follow-up story. I just don't want to dominate the first 30 minutes, no. This next story is a good story, and there's a lot of takeaways from this story. But how's your day going, and what do you make of the adventures of my day so far?
Yeah, that's actually inspirational to me to hear you go out and do that, because that's something that I definitely need to be getting up and moving around more and doing, and just getting out of my head. That's for sure. It does help for me to get outside a little bit, to move my body around. With as far as crying, that if it's chronic, if you find yourself in that place where you need to go through and have those deep hyperventilating crying spells more than once a week, or more, let's just say more than once a month, that is an absolute sign that you need to reach out and start working with a mental health healthcare provider. It just is. If you're getting into those deep sobs, because that place is addictive, Frank. It's addictive. It's addictive to fall into that, because it's a kind of pain. It's like hot sauce in a way. Hot sauce releases some endorphins and in your body. The hot sauce, you go through, you sweat, you get that euphoria a bit from the endorphin rush. Your body's trying to deal with this toxin, this food substance in you that is creating this reaction. That kind of crying also, it releases some endorphins. You get a dopamine release from it, but you can get addicted to that kind of situation, and where you reminisce, or when I say reminisce, I mean you ruminate over the same thoughts, and you play that inner film strip, that video clip, over and over again, until it becomes a very deep psychological rut that it's your go-to, and then that becomes your source of happiness. I can tell you that there have been times in my life where I was in such pain that I was just at night, holding a pillow for comfort, just holding the pillow for comfort. And that it doesn't that sound like really sad? Like when you're in such a bad place that you literally are hugging a pillow for just to get some kind of feel good emotion, because hugs are wonderful. And whenever you start doing those things, those are triggers, and you need to listen to your triggers. Pay attention to your triggers. Pay attention to yourself, and cut the rut. What's hard for anyone to do is to stop complaining for a week. Try to not complain for a day. I like, sometimes people will go on silent retreats, in place, in situ, where they will not say anything, or not speak, because then you get bound up in your head and you start to hear all that stuff. Well, I'm going to put a collective label on all this, and mentally, you're in the swamps. You're deep in the swamps, and it's easy to get stuck in the bog. It's easy to get stuck in the bog, in the swamps. There's some time to spend there. That's important. It's important to get in touch with your emotions, to be grounded. But that's also quicksand. You can get stuck there. You okay?
Right.
Yeah, you can get stuck there in the quicksand, in the swamps.
Life is better in this other corner, but apparently not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, and Noah, I'm not advising anyone out there. I'm not saying like the old masculine cowboy ethos, like never cry, men don't cry.
Oh, I know.
I think that crying can be very healthy. It can be very therapeutic. I think there's a time to do it. I just think that when someone you love, when you're going through something like that, and maybe you feel helpless, don't know what to do, sometimes you just feel like crying. And then sometimes I might feel like crying every day, right? I might be like, well, I just want to wake up every day and cry. And I just sort of like reminded myself of what Risa Berlin had taught me, which is as much as you might want to, focus more on the solutions. If you need a good cry, then cry, but move past it, and then be focus on solutions. That doesn't mean, to your point, that doesn't mean that people shouldn't go through the grieving process, because if people skip the grieving process, that can be really bad, right? Like, there is a time to mourn. There's a season to mourn. And that's why, even now with everybody saying, you see all over Facebook, everyone's like, oh, positive vibes only. And I'm like, okay, I know what they mean. Be around positive people who support you, and they want to see you do well, and they believe in you, and they don't discourage your dreams. But on the other hand, it's impossible. I mean, there's times when your friends are having a bad day, when you're having a bad day, when you have to go through something, when going through something is going to be good for you. So it's just not, we've talked about that here on the podcast before. It's just not realistic to avoid negative emotion. Negative emotion can be a wonderful, it can be a wonderful catalyst for reflection, right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff if it's used properly. So I want to make it clear. Noah, let me go switch gears for a second here. You laid out some good stuff there. With some of the spots you've been in, and I really respect you being vulnerable there. So it's interesting how the dominoes of life can fall, right? I did a video yesterday I shot for my uncle. My uncle turned, I think, 62, 63 years old. My aunt and uncle raised me for like 3 years. And that's a story. Maybe I'll tell that later in the podcast. But anyway, he got me thinking about how the dominoes of our life fall, like how my aunt and uncle took me in and changed my whole life. I got to live in the suburbs. I got to be zoned for good high school, changed my whole life. But similarly today, when those tires happened, and I'm like, okay, the fun is over. You went to the park, you had 3.5 great hours, you kicked butt. Now it's a 5.5, 6 mile walk home, and the sun is cranking now. The sun is going to hit 94, 95. There's no partly cloudy here today, brother. This sun is scorched. This is a scorching summer sun. Me, Mr. Frank, Mr. Bragging, no sunscreen Frank, right?
Yeah.
But you're low on water. There's no water place nearby the next couple miles. You're low on water, But I thought there was something in me that thought, you know what, Frank? You need to make this a little hard on yourself. For some reason, I was like, I want to make this inconvenient, because just as a test, kind of like the same reason people take cold showers, right? Sometimes you take a cold shower just as a form of discipline to make your body do what you want it to. Sometimes, you're getting up early and you'll say, hey, body, you're waking up at 4:30 and 5 in the morning. I know you don't want to, but I'm in charge, and I'm going to exercise my discipline on you today, and we're doing that, right? So sometimes that's what I was doing. I was like, you know what? Pioneers, Indians, a lot of people at a lot of points in history had to walk 10 miles. Somebody in Africa today is walking 10 miles to get water, right? So I was just sort of taking sort of that ethos, that mindset, which is, man, suck it up. There's worse things in the world. You're going to walk that. You're going to make the best of it. Anyway, sun is out. Sun is cranking. So I walk like 6-7 blocks. And this is the most miscellaneous thing ever, Noah. I'm walking, and I look down. I'm fine. I'm sitting there like singing to myself. I look down, and there's a snail. Now it's like 12:30. It's getting close to 90 degrees. And this snail, snails have that moisture, kind of that sludge, that
slime.
Sludge.
Yeah.
Yeah, that little slime, whatever it is. So I look down, and this snail, he's got a big old, and I'm like, of all the things I could see at 12:30 on a Monday afternoon night, I'm like, snails are not supposed to be out right now. What is this snail doing in the hot sun on the sidewalk? Like, that's just the most random miscellaneous thing ever. So I'm like, I see him, and I'm like, and so now my brain is, and I'm not like Mr. Carpenter, like I'm not a zoologist. I'm not brilliant in these ways. I'm fascinated with gardening, but I don't garden. I just bought my first aloe vera plant on Saturday. So now I'm
you're good. You're growing roots there.
I got an aloe vera plant that I got to care for. So anyway, I'm looking at, I'm like a snail, and I'm like, Frank, I'm creative. I got a pretty high fight IQ, but I'm not like Mr. Let's put animals back together again or whatever. I'm not that person. But I was like, I've been really growing this conscious for animals, for non-human life. And I thought, it just occurred to me. I said, you know what? He was kind of poking out of his shell, so I could see he still had life and he still had some slime to him. So I'm like, he isn't dried out, he isn't scorched, he isn't dead. So pick him up and find some shade for him. I don't know if that's the right thing, but I'm like, that just occurred to me. Like, give him a shot, right? If he makes it, give him a shot. Take him to where there's to where. Sorry, I ate a bunch of oatmeal and Brazilian nuts before this.
Get him off the asphalt or off the danger surface where other humans might be. Of course.
I'm going to save a snail's life, right? It's Save a Snail Day, right? So I'm like, I'm going to take him. This is where the story gets a little weird, okay? So I pick him up. He's like poking out, like he's still alive. He's still doing his thing. And I'm thinking, I'm feeling good. I'm like, dude, I'm doing a really good deed for the day. God's going to be happy with this. You know, I'm going to save a snail. I find a nice spot in the shade and I put him down. And when I leave to go back to the sidewalk to continue my walk, my 5.5, 6 mile walk back home, I'm like, there's this big guy, bigger than you, guys like 260, 265. It's like some muscle, half muscle, but like half, you know, way too much weight, overweight. You know, bald-headed guy, no offense to you, but that's how he was looking. Cranky as anything. He says to me, what are you doing? And really mean hostile, right? I know hostile when I see it. I'm like, well, you know, I saw this snail on the sidewalk and I decided I wanted to put him in shade because it's going to get really hot today and I didn't want him to just die on the sidewalk. He's like, yeah, we have a snail problem. We kill him. And he starts cussing. Get the F off my property right now. Get the F off. He's red-faced, Noah. This is he went from he's like, we have a snail problem. Now, I never heard this is just me. I never heard of any homeowner having a snail problem. Like, I've heard of an ant problem. I've seen roach problems. I've seen people have mice problems. I've seen people have moths. I just personally have never heard of a snail problem, right? So he was totally unsympathetic. And furthermore, he was like, literally like, and now I was like 2 feet. So where I went, I was like 2 feet from the sidewalk to put that snail there. So I was on his property by 2 feet. I could step 2 feet back and be on the sidewalk. And now I'm on a public sidewalk. Now I'm on his. So he's like, get the F off my property. He's cussing. So I get back on the public sidewalk and he's carrying on. And the first thing that I thought, okay, don't, just restrain, don't say anything, whatever. And then the guy was walking over. He was walking over toward me, and I was like, dude, is this real? Like, here I am. I'm trying to like spare this snail, and I've been sparing like flies. I've been trying to spare as many things as I can lately. The guy is walking over or whatever, and I was so disgusted by this guy, Noah, as much as I was restrained, that I said a few choice words to him.
Frank.
I did. And what's even more interesting is I didn't feel bad about it. I didn't feel
Frank,
bad.
You know what I would say is, in that moment, there's a phrase you can use to totally disarm him and throw him. It is something that you can say that will come at him and just go right through. It's an Achilles heel. It's an Achilles heel hook, if I may.
Yeah.
And that's what's inside of you that's making you that angry is not really about the snail. And you should deal with it. That's it, to really practice nonviolence. The ahimsa in Sanskrit, because you were practicing, this good karmic deed with the snail, which is probably a slug, a pest, and it's a pest. And what's one person's snail is another person's slug, garden slug.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Okay. But really,
like caterpillars, is there this whole thing? The caterpillar is the butterfly, is the snail and the slug, or are they just the same thing, or do they actually have like a metamorphosis? And And
Yeah. That I think that in that case, what was troubling him, that anger that you taste in your mouth is really not about the snail, and you should really focus on working on that. That's choice, right? That's choice, right?
That's good. That's good. What I realized, there were a couple of takeaways, because of course when I walked off, I analyzed that I had another 5 miles to walk to analyze.
I know you had 5 miles to contemplate it.
So I thought, number one, well, inner city Frank is not dead, right? Little Baltimore inner city Frank is not dead. He's not dead. He's definitely evolved and ascended, and he has a lot of restraint, but he's not dead.
But Brazilian black belt Frank, that's a tree. I don't want to say tree hugging. Let me see what's the phrase. You say granola, but hippie Frank.
I'm not a full on hippie yet. I'm not.
No. You still. I'm taking your hippie badge away for the day.
I'm not a tree hugger yet. I realize I'm not a tree hugger. I'm not a
or snail lover. You're a snail lover now.
I'm a snail defender. I do defend. I am now an official defender of snails. But the other thing I thought of,
I need a shirt like that for you. The defender of snails.
I save slugs.
I save snails.
Yeah.
And we could have spit on the snail to give it some water.
He still had some slime to him, so you're in.
Oh,
so
he's good. He may need spit on you.
The guy that I was dealing with was infinitely more slimy. I'll just say that he was.
Oh,
he was a lot slimier than the snail, than the slug or whatever it was. But
that's unfortunate, Frank. Sorry. I know you're trying to do well. You're trying to do good, not well. You're trying to do good.
There's a quote in the fight game that I think I may have used it before. I'll use it again. And this occurred to me in the next half mile as I was walking. It is the punch you don't see coming. The punch you don't see coming is the punch that'll knock you out. And I went from this hero that's saving snails spontaneously out of the goodness of my heart.
Rich.
I went from doing the best deed I could in the 5 or 6 hours I was awake to turning around and looking at this hostile guy who's fomenting at the mouth, who's red-faced, and who is the epitome of get off my lawn, get off my property, we kill them, and looking at me like he was menacing and like he wanted to rip my head off. And so since I didn't expect that, I actually thought in the moment when I explained to him what I did with the snail, I thought I would have thought that he would have been like, oh, well, that's cool. But the only thing was when I instantly looked at him, I could tell that there's whatever he's gonna say next is not gonna be good, right? So it just reminded me that a lot of times, if you gave me an hour to prepare for that guy, no problem. If you gave me 5 minutes to prepare for him, no problem. Just turning around and getting back on that sidewalk, I was like, whoa. And it lets you realize that even with the, sort of the warrior poetry ideal, that there is still a lot of warrior in there that wants to stand ground, that wants to stand up. And now the poet side is still there to say, hey, restraint, move along. Don't say anything more, move along. Don't say anything that's going to, really escalate. The poet is there to keep some level of peace, but the warrior on this occasion, I was surprised, said, you know what, let's give him about 30 seconds of, let's give him 30 seconds of Baltimore, of the first 14 years of Baltimore. And so in any event, that was something that happened today. And it's interesting, like I said, how the dominoes of life fall. If I don't get the 2 flat tires, I don't encounter that guy. We don't know if I saved the snail, because he might have went later and, eviscerated and killed the snail. But
regardless,
anyway,
he had that extra 5 minutes of life, or whatever. He got that extra increment. Hey, I want to jump in. I want to insert myself into this storyline a little bit with another similar but very much less dramatic. I'm in full job search mode while during a pandemic, during the middle of summer, and also during my own transition state career-wise. Okay, because like my coursework doesn't start until January 2021 for and I guess I should say, I'm pretty close to it. I've got to complete one little task, but it's virtually a done deal. But for January, and so I'm in full job search mode. And last week, I'm getting a lot of unsolicited emails from recruiters, and most of them are from the Indian subcontinent. There's been a shift, and where they're doing an arbitrage where it's cheaper for certain resources to just constantly outreach to people and then vet them. So I had a job. So I had like a screening call with them, and I gave them my interest and salary requirements and all that. And then said, okay, this is very early in the morning, and I'm like, okay, my boss will call you. My boss will contact you this afternoon, or right away, and you do a rate verification and information to move forward. And then silence. Nothing happens. This has not happened to me once or twice. This has happened to me, I'm going to say, about 40 to 50 times. 40 to 50 times. And I looked at my emails today, and so I messaged this particular recruiter. I'm like, what happened? And it's always a derivation of the client's job is on hold. Oh, it's on hold, or the job requirement changed, or they haven't gotten back to me yet. But you just, like the magic 8-ball, pick a response. Like with absolute certainty, it will be one of those three responses. Okay, absolute certainty. It's never a straightforward. Your salary's too high. You don't have the right skill set, or they're looking for someone with less experience than you or with more experience than you in this. There's not a straightforward, look you in the eye, here's what's going on. Okay? There's a lot of phoniness, flakiness.
Now,
and
do you I want to ask a question to that. Do you think that maybe they're just picking your brain to see what you know? In other words, you think you were genuinely interviewed for a job, or do you think, there are recruiters and people out there that just want expertise. They interview for expertise. For instance, if in some writing jobs or some reporting jobs, part of the job will say, send us your 5 best story ideas that you would do on whatever. Well, guess what? Even if they never interview you, if you send in that resume, you've now given them your 5 best story ideas for this particular whatever. And that becomes a currency. That becomes a treasure to them a lot of times, because they get these ideas. They don't hire the journalists. They don't interview them, but they certainly suck their ideas. That is common. Does any of that go on in your industry, or is it like, no, it's absolutely not that?
No, it's clearly not that. This is a shell game, and so it may, and I have multiple emails because I do what's called A/B testing. I will use one resume profile, but I'll have a different resume profile for other jobs, because I'm in a career transition state. I have 20 plus years of financial accounting experience, but I'm also doing some more things that are data analytics, data science, and so I have multiple versions of who I am. As far as resume goes, what's on paper. You can write different versions of yourself, and so I have different emails, and I know things because I know which channel, I know which email account comes in. But sure, and so I text this individual, and he's in India, Bangalore, as we would know in the West traditionally, customer. And I get a response of pick one of those three responses, but it was essentially the job's on hold, the search is on hold. Okay, that's what I got. Not 2 hours later, in my other email account, same guy, same email address, same job, saying now, hey, contact me if you're interested in this role. I'm like, all right. Then it made me stop because it helped. That helped me. That helped me a lot because instead, first it was like, okay, facepalm. All right, hold on, Noah. You need to look at the evidence here. You need to be data driven on this. And I step back and go, where have I been successful in getting real job leads and offers? And I have spent way too much time dealing with that kind of riffraff because none of them have ever gone past me talking to them. None of them. I've never spoken to the actual hiring people at the company that I would work for. Never. Okay? And I'm saying this on this platform, and I'm going to be telling this. I'm going to write an article on LinkedIn. Okay? Which is, if you really want results, go straight to the company. Go straight and get after it. In fact, I have wasted so much time on LinkedIn. I have wasted so much time on LinkedIn. Indeed, LinkedIn, ZipRecruiter, all those garbage, Frank. Those are all garbage. Yeah, they have job listings on them and people do, but it's not working. I'm going to spend, and sorry for the rant here, but I really wake up, Noah. You're just busy work. This is all just busyness. Oh, I'm so productive. I responded to 65, I sent out my resume to 65 listings today. And you know what? I have been doing that for months, man. And I've been wasting my time.
I would love to see, and I've been in your shoes before. The truth of it is that when you're talking about job recruiters, this whole process, it is a really ugly process. And if somebody did a book on it, it would expose. So for instance, there are so many jobs that are advertised where they already know who they want to hire, but they have to legally. So they're legally, they already know there's someone in-house they want to give it to, but they have to legally pretend that it's an open process. There's so much game playing. They don't tell you. They won't tell you, hey, I've had people be honest with me and say, yes, there is an internal candidate, right? That's one of the first questions, because why go through the trouble of a resume, a cover letter? They want these companies, especially the level you're playing at, they want the resume. You might have to have a resume that fits them. You might even have to redo your resume. A cover letter, all the time, sometimes the time to research them. You go through so much time. And all the while, they already have a candidate. They're playing a game. They already have a candidate that they know, or they know what they want. They know you're not it. But if you call them and just can be like, hey, can I ask you 3 quick questions so that you can make sure, is it worth your time? You can introduce yourself. You can ask them a few questions. You can't, right? Very few of them want that. So I'm with you. What I learned about that process is your best bet when you go through the formal channels, like you're applying online, you're applying through an executive recruiter. It's a very robotic, informal, it's throwing spaghetti at a wall. I mean, it's improbable, especially the kind of jobs you're going after. So, I'm always a fan of, Jim Rohn, the great motivator, he talks about he's talking about busyness versus productive. And he used to be like, the leads that matter are in the presence of. He used to say, in the presence of, meaning in the presence of the prospective buyer, in the presence of the decision maker. He didn't even want to waste time with, if you're not the decision maker, he wants the decision maker on the phone. And these are very human processes. I just talked to my uncle. My uncle's been selling copiers, like Xerox copiers. He's been doing that 20 some years. He's made some very good money, 6-figure money for probably the last 2 decades doing that.
That's cool.
He's very good at his job. Well, now with COVID-19 and the world being flipped on its head, everything he does has to be like we're doing, virtual and and Zoom and all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And he's adapting, right? And I said, well, does that mean less work for you? He's like, no, I work just as much as I did before. And I said, well, how do you like it? Compare it. He's like, now he's an old school guy, but he's like, Frank, it just doesn't compare. When you're there, when your energy's in the room, it's like we talk about with jiu-jitsu. If all of your students were just virtual and online, there's something missing versus you and I rolling. I mean, there's just something, or me being right there in the room, telling you, encouraging you or showing you the move. It's this, there is no substitute for the human element. And it's the same for these job things. Some things are just never going to take the place. As humans, whether we like it or not, whatever cognitive bias, we like human connection. We like to be in the room. The vibration is different. Even what you and I are doing now, even though there is a vibe, there's a connection. If we were in the same room, it's exponential. It is exponential,
right.
And then if we create a certain studio, like what Joe Rogan has done, that can enhance that experience. That can enhance that human experience and what the senses take in. And we could get noise cancellation. We could do things to the studio, to the acoustics, to where the only thing our senses gather is just you and I in a room, and there's no other sensory distractions or sensory stimulation, which increases the focus of us, our energy in the room, right? So there is, I'm with you. I learned, like, you could be really busy. You could send out a ton of stuff on those sites, man. It's almost like a needle in a haystack. If you can't get someone on the phone, if you don't know someone there, if you can't send an email to an executive and get a response, I mean, those are way better uses of your time. People don't like them, but this is the other thing, Noah, they don't, like you just said, I always thought this with dating, and I think this with job searches. Imagine a dating world, and I know you're a married man. I'm single, and I
know. If we ever talk about this, let's be clear. This is about you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is not about Noah, but in the dating world, I'm someone who has dated quite a bit, and I always thought what would be a wonderful thing is if the world was brave enough where we could have like exit interviews for dating, where you could tell the person like 3 things, you could give feedback. Now, some of that might seem cruel and it might seem whatever, but people, like, that's what eats at people at the end of a relationship or at the end of dating someone, or even 1 date or 2 dates, someone you like is like, well, why? And if people would be honest, even though a lot of the reasons would be shallow.
Maybe that's what those dating apps need, is a feedback mechanism for that.
Yes, and the same thing with the job stuff, where because of legal reasons, right? Legal reasons and also time issues, they're not going to say anything. They're scared that they're going to get sued to smithereens, or it's just too time consuming to be explaining it to everybody. But the process of hiring is so pro company, and like as the person seeking the job, you have most people have very little leverage. You have to go through all this work for like a 1% or 2% chance. It's unbelievable. The risk versus reward in terms of time and energy and effort is insane. No, this system is so broken. I can't believe we're still doing that system.
It is. You're right.
It's
so inefficient. It's so inefficient that you're right. The system, the system of acquiring human talent it's just deplorable. We've got to move out of this thing, and just these speed job environments are great. But I wanted to say something about that. So, I always, this is a moment where I can shine some light on deliberate practice. Okay. One of what we're talking about, what I'm saying is, if what I am seeking there is honest feedback. Okay. Because I'm coachable. I'm coach. If you're like, Noah, you shouldn't have said those things. That was you were too familiar. You were too fraternal. You're too gushy. Or what do you even say? If I feel comfortable, I'm going to just gush. If I get that signal, but if my signals, if I get the signal of like, oh, you can be very personable. If I feel that way, I'm going to be very personable when I'm on an interviewing. Okay, that's just how I am. I become,
Are you saying mirroring? You generally try to mirror the other person. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah, because I'm doing it. I guess there. The signals you get in person or on the phone can be misread. If the recruiter is saying these things, we don't have that problem in jiu-jitsu. We don't have that problem in our sport. You get great feedback because it's binary. Either you tap.
That's what I've always listen. Most of the world is a dog and pony show. It's all show. It's all fluff. It's all manipulation and get you to buy something you don't really need and get you all emotionally excited about something that an emotional purchase that you're going to have buyer's remorse in 5 hours when you go home. But like we say with the jiu-jitsu and the fight sports, it's a truth serum. You get the truth serum. You're not, there's no way to sugarcoat it. It is what it is. You just got tapped. You rolled with 5 people for a total of 25 minutes and you got tapped 30 times. I mean,
you may not know why.
Yes, you may not.
You may not know why you got tapped. If your skill level's not.
You notice a trend of people shredding through your guard, or you notice that you're getting arm barred a disproportionate amount of time, and you get the feedback that we're talking about, where you can get the functional the valuable feedback of, okay, you get a volume of feedback. I need to work on this. And I think like the dating world doesn't always get that because people want to be nice or people just ghost you. And by the way, I mean, I'm not saying I'm Mr. Perfect. I've had people that I just didn't, I didn't know what to say too. But if the world was wired differently, it's almost like, like if there was an exit interview, I said, look, I think you're great. This is what didn't do it for me. But then that could come off as like, that could come off in a mean way or a harsh way. And then vice versa with
the volume went out, Frank. Okay, there it is. Now it's back. What did you change?
I was going to say, women are normally there's a surprising number of women that aren't shy about telling you, I didn't like this or this, or you think you're all that, whatever. And even in like online dating on women's profiles, they'll tell you, some of them are very detailed about, hey, this is what I always amazed, like, wow, these women know what they want. They just spell it out. Bang, 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 bang.
If you look at some job posts, they're like, there's no one person who knows and does all. There's no, that is not a wish list. That is a dream. That's a dream. It's a fantasy.
You had 5 years to do it. All the stuff, they're like, we want you to do this. And bro, if you gave me 5 years and you're awesome at your job, you couldn't do all those things, right? Like,
I know. It's like this is improbable. There is not, what they're looking for is not even a unicorn. It's a unicorn's unicorn.
But no, we're saying all of this in a roundabout way to say, no matter how technological the world gets, it really is, when we say it's a who you know world, right? Meaning who you know, meaning if you know someone in there who has some familiarity, whether you train jiu-jitsu with them, I mean, everybody knows that. Everybody knows that if you just have that person that has an in, that you got to shut. And let me tell you a story that just happened. This just happened with my cousin. So I grew up in a house, where when I was in high school, my uncle's name was Frank, his son's name was Frank, and my name is Frank. So we had 3 Franks in the same house. And my Aunt Lorraine used to call, little Frank was the 3-year-old, medium Frank was me, and then big Frank was my uncle. And so little Frank wound up being a 265-pound nose tackle who was like, pretty much all state in the state of Maryland, and went and played for one of the, top 5 or 10 teams in the state of Maryland, and then went and played Division I football as a nose tackle. Very nice guy. Was class president, I think, three of his 4 years in high school, class president of one of the most prestigious private schools in Maryland. And he was a football coach at Calvert Hall. Calvert Hall has been like top 3 or 4 in the state. Like, I guess in the last few years, they've been top 3 or 4 a couple of those years in the state of Maryland. So they've got some really phenomenal football programs. He coaches their defensive line, which is the strength of their team. They've had some phenomenal defenses at Calvert Hall. Well, he had been at Calvert Hall, I think, for 12 years. He was a class president when he was attending there, like 3 years. Then he was like all-state football player, played D1. This guy literally is the poster boy, bleeds Calvert Hall football, like Cardinal, that Cardinal red, we call it. I mean, he is the poster boy for Calvert Hall, right? So he just applied to be the head coach. And this is a couple of months ago. He applied to be the head coach for them. He was endorsed by the previous coach. He was endorsed by the previous head coach to be the coach. Noah, this guy who is the poster boy, who'd been a coach for them, an assistant coach for them for 12 years, who coached their defense, which has been the best part of their team, who was a coach of their teams that were top 3, top 4 in the state multiple years, who played Division I football, who was all state for them, who was a 3-time class president. Do you know that when it came time to decide who's the next head football coach, he was a candidate, they didn't even call him to tell him he didn't get the job. They didn't even call him. The poster boy for the, it is amazing the arrogance that a lot of the people, even this was a guy that they knew, they were familiar with him. This is a guy who the previous head coach said, this is your guy, you need to hire him. This is how crazy the hiring world is now. They went outside, they hired a guy who hadn't been with the program in years. They hired a guy who wasn't with any like juggernauts, somebody who maybe spoke better or whatever. Didn't even call my cousin to say, hey, Frank, we're going in a different direction. We love you. We'd love for you to stay on as the defensive line coach. This is a crazy, what does that even say about the loyalty? Now, normally a guy like that or a woman in that position should get that job, right? You've been there for 12 years, whatever.
Or get a developmental role in the organization if they have the budget for it, or a conversation, just a conversation. This is, because this is reputation.
Noah,
this is reputation.
Do you know they didn't even tell him why he did? Again, we're talking about the conversation of the feedback.
Yeah.
What factored into your decision making? Again, all of the legalese and the lawyers talking. Not only did they not tell him, they didn't even call him to tell him you didn't get it. So he couldn't ask, what more could I have done?
Heartbreak.
So that really gutted him. This is a guy who for 20 some years is like, this school is huge to me, to my life. So it's just like, it's a reminder out there. It's happened in the NFL. It's happened in the NBA that, when you look at what's happened with too many companies where there's an arrogance, honestly, Noah, that a lot of companies have. They feel like, well, you're going to have the job. You're lucky if you, I remember, I'm not going to say the name of the company, but I worked for some major companies. I remember one time, one of the senior VPs, we were in there and we were talking about raises, and I was, stating the case for my raise. And he was telling me, oh, well, we had layoffs and literally, so I kept kind of pushing the issue like, hey, but, and let's present this. And finally he said to me point blank, he said, Frank, be happy you have a job. Be happy you have a job. Maybe
you were misreading. Maybe it's a misread. That's good feedback.
Yeah. That's what he said, though. Be happy you have a job. Now, my point is with that is that is the way that a lot of companies just think. They just think that logic is not going to work on this new generation now. It's not going to work. It's just not going to work. Where the companies have leverage and that sort of arrogance, and it's not going to work. I think that employees and the prospective employees do deserve better. Some companies do it phenomenally, to their credit. There are some phenomenal companies out there. They are the exception. I think generally, certainly the hiring process and certainly the way, I think that a lot of employees aren't really valued to the extent you would expect them. It's very much kind of like, well, you don't like it, you're easily replaceable, be happy you have a job. That's the typical job, unfortunately.
I always take care of my downstream team, because I always do. I don't care. I do everything I can to develop my downstream team so that they, they get better. They get to sit at the table and do well.
I remember, we won't talk about where or when, but I remember an instance where someone was having a lot of personal problems, and you worked with him. You were very compassionate and empathetic. He was very good at his job, but you worked with him to try to to try to help him get everything together and still be productive, and you worked with him, and a lot of people would. That was very compassionate, for you to kind of stand up for him and believe that he could be redeemed, and see his value, and just realize that people go through life things, and to sort of work with him, try to work with him to get through it.
Oh, I practice the 4 strike rule, not even the 3, but the 4, because some, certain kinds of things are going on. You sometimes need a while. It depends upon severity too. There's some things that can, hey, this is all case dependent. All right. Hey, just switch it up. I even,
we got to talk about, we will be remiss if we don't talk about Jorge Masvidal, because Masvidal fights Usman. I think it's
I quit looking at the UFC because I'm trying to finish up some of my own programming projects. So I've had my head down, trying to get through, and I've been putting a lot of effort into job searching. Just I will spend 6 hours a day, on stuff. But anyways, so I all I saw on my Twitter feed was the BMF has stepped up. What? This is fight week. I'm getting tuned back in now. What's going on?
By the way, if I were you, the approach I would go is I would research the executives. I would look at who that knows someone there. I would get on the phone. I would write letters. I would write emails to them. I would look for something that is, that is human, that is a way in, so that when that resume or those materials get sent in, that person is sort of an ambassador for you and is looking for it. Hey, let me see that. I talked to him for 5 minutes, or I've been emailing him, and just a courtesy. Like, I would reach out to them, maybe even ask them a few questions about their experience, almost like an informational interview. But at the same time, I saw this position there. Any input, is appreciated. A couple specific questions, but I would really go about it in the human way, reaching out to some of the employees there, and then trying to get them to give you some insight, or if they're in a decision-making role, they're waiting for it. Hey, when that comes in, send me an email, Noah, let me know, and I'll put in a good word for you, or I'll check in with HR, something like that. Now, what my uncle used to do, and he did this a lot with sales, but I know a lot of the best salespeople, they would just cold, instead of cold call, they would go to the business, drive. You can't do that with India.
You can't do that right now.
You can't do it now with COVID. And they would just go and introduce themselves, and it was a numbers game. And it was like, it's bold, it's not for everybody, but they would make that human contact, right? And then when it would work, and they'd get a 5-minute conversation, 10-minute, 15-minute, 20 minutes, now they had a rapport with somebody that was like, I met him, he's got great people skills, he looks good, he looks sharp, and at least you got a way better chance than just throwing in your resume and like you just wasted, 30 minutes on that whole thing. Anyway,
Yeah.
so going to Masvidal.
But before I do that, I need to do some prep work just in a broad perspective because, I recognize all I wanted to say when I shared that story today was I recognize today that I need to pivot, and it'll take me a couple of days to get a game plan together for a strategy, and then develop at least 2 or 3 packages of how I approach it. To start to get that conversation going. I have to work on that a little bit.
I'll say this. There are some very talented recruiters and HR people out there, but I'll say this in my experience, in my professional experience, they're fairly rare. They're not common. I haven't been overall very impressed with the HR people and the recruiters. I have not been very impressed. It's pretty sad. I don't know what they're looking for. When I think the companies need to do a better job who their recruiters are and who their HR people are. I'm not impressed with the vast majority of people I've seen in those. Those are key decision-making capacities. It seems to me all you need to really be in general, like HR and the recruiters, is just need a master's degree. Some of them have them in HR. And I don't think that teaches you that they're more concerned. A lot of HR people are more concerned with the administrative and all of the legal stuff. It's sad. They're really more concerned with that stuff than really reading people and really drafting well. I see it like they're so strong on the administrative and checking the boxes and protecting themselves legally. And then in general, so weak, in my opinion, on the people reading and putting the pieces together. I'm really unimpressed. If I didn't already have 30 books I wanted to write, I would tackle HR as a subject for some curious reporter out there. Like, you would have a field day with the folly and the number of how much of a joke modern day HR and recruiting is in general. It really is. It's a super broken system. There's very little transparency. It's one big dog and pony show. And we'll leave it at that. But going to Jorge Masvidal and Usman, that's a pretty exciting matchup. I think they used to train together at American Top Team, just like Gilbert Burns, who I trained with before, trains down there. Colby Covington. It's amazing. They're just a factory of the lightweights. But what I was thinking of, Noah, recently, as soon as I saw the thing, I thought, well, I tried to make sense of like, okay, who do I like in the fight? And I thought, wow, that's a pretty big turn of events, because Masvidal not too long ago, a couple weeks ago, was like, listen, I don't, the UFC has to give me a lot more money. I don't want to fight. And, of course, Conor McGregor was saying that. And we saw some other big fighters have been saying that. And Nate Diaz and Nick Diaz have been saying that for a long time. So it's like John Jones has been saying that, right?
JJ, yeah.
Not enough money, and especially now COVID-19 has hurt the money flow. So I thought, well, Masvidal looks like he wants to sit, and apparently I don't know if they sweetened the pot for him because they needed him to save the card or whatever. But it's interesting that he felt like the money was right, but also that he felt like, hey, I'm in really good shape. I'm in really good shape, because I think if he takes it, I think number one, he probably got more money than he had been asking for previously. So he probably got a bump in money, whatever that was. Number two, he could have waited to fight, maybe he thought, this is a big thing for him, because if he beats Usman, the money he's talking about he wants, he's guaranteed to get a lot more money, right? If you're the champion and you can win, you can win every match you win as champion, gives you more leverage to make more money. You're just going to make more money. If you're the champion for let's say hypothetically, Anderson Silva, you're the champion for 10 matches, 10 fights, 12 fights, you're going to make a lot of money. You might not make, John Jones has been through some things. You might not make every last dollar and cent that you want, but you are going to make a lot more money than you did when you weren't champion, right? And being the champion is how you get paid a lot more money. It might not be all the money you think you want, but you're going to make a heck of a lot more money than you were making before. So Masvidal could be thinking, well, number one, I want to be champion. There's a lot of sponsorships when you're champion. They probably gave him a bump to, kind of save the card kind of thing. And of course, if you can beat the champion every fight thereafter, you make a lot more money than you've made in your career, right? So it is, but I did think, well, okay, is Masvidal in great shape? And I thought, can he keep Usman from taking him down? Because Usman is very versatile. That's really his strength. He kind of reminds me, he's a different style of fighter, but in the way that he wins, he reminds me of GSP. He's very capable anywhere. He's strong everywhere. He's not the best striker, but he's serviceable. He knows how to get the job done. He's a very good wrestler. He's got great top pressure. His jiu-jitsu could use a lot of improvement, but he makes up for it by being on top of you and being very heavy and dominating you and holding you down and punishing you and racking up points. And he's got great cardio. He's very smart. He's very tough. He checks a lot of boxes. He's very versatile. So he's got more ways to win. Masvidal's been riding a lot more confidence, seems to have hit his groove, seems to really be dialed in. His hands are, he's got the best hands in the division, the best boxing hands at 170, some of the best hands in all of UFC. And he's super dangerous. But my thing is, can he keep Usman from taking him down? And I'm inclined to say no. I have to put more thought on that. But I'm inclined to say that no, Usman will be able to take him down. The question is, how long can Masvidal stay up? And can, if he can stay up for 2-3 minutes around, that's a lot of swings. He's got much better hands than Usman does. So it's a very interesting fight. And I don't know. I think it's a pay-per-view, right? I think this one's a pay-per-view. Yeah, this one's a pay-per-view, right? This is not.
I can check and see. Yeah, I can check and see. Yeah. And styles make the fight, right? So I can't speak to I can't.
If anything, it could help Masvidal. It could help Masvidal by being on short notice because Burns is a different fighter than Masvidal. They're different fighters, and I know that Usman is familiar with Masvidal. But again, on 1 week notice, he's got to kind of change gears strategically. Whereas Masvidal is kind of the fighter, kind of like a Diaz brother. Masvidal just does what he does. There's not a lot of strategy per se. Masvidal just does what he does, man. He doesn't have to really adapt to you. He makes you adapt to him. Usman's an adapter, kind of like GSP. He's a guy that likes to strategize. So in some little small way, Masvidal could benefit a little bit from, hey, he's only got a week to change gears from fighting Gilbert Burns to fighting me. And Burns has more of a threat of the takedown and top game jiu-jitsu. So I was thinking about that. Like, yeah, that could help Masvidal. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Oh no, I was gonna, when I said styles make the fight, I was going there because I don't have a lot of background. I don't have a lot of background with these two fighters of watching them and their build up to where they are today. I was looking forward to Gilbert Burns in the fight, but still, now that we have this, what else is on the card?
I don't know, but what I remember of it, just because I'm living my life, but it looked like a pretty good card. I have to. They are. If you started saying, "Oh yeah, they're not. Oh yeah, they're on there," I know it's Fight Island, right? So it's over in Abu Dhabi. Where I wanted to go. I was going to try to go there a couple of years ago, but So yeah,
we do need to do a podcast from there. We need to do a podcast from the Burj Hotel. I watched an engineering program on it. Amazing. We need to do a podcast from there. Just for that, right? Just for that.
Plug something here though too, Noah, and we should probably wrap it up. I know you've got stuff to do there. So yesterday was the birthday of my uncle, and my uncle turned 62, 63. I mentioned that earlier, and it made me think about like the role he played in my life. And my uncle, I love him, he loves me, but it's always been like a tough love relationship. Like we've never been as close as I think I wanted or he wanted. He definitely helped me. He changed the trajectory of my life, him and my Aunt Lorraine. But we never have been as close. We still call each other for the major holidays. If I go back to Baltimore, I'll stop by and see them. We'll do dinner. But it's never been like as close as it should be. And I was thinking about that. And I was thinking about, like I was saying earlier, the dominoes of our life, how they fall, right? Like these things that happen and completely change the trajectory of your life. And I thought about so there's a story that I'm going to put up on my YouTube. It'll be up in the next couple hours, but I tell the story of how I ended up there at 14 years old, living with my uncle Frank and my aunt Lorraine, and it's a pretty interesting story, and it really, I think a lot of people will relate to it. So that'll be up. I think I'll call it. Gosh, what am I going to call that? It involves like gratitude and the gift of giving and things like that. But it'll be on Frank Forza YouTube. I'll have it up there. I'll have it on like Facebook. I'll put it on my Facebook too, Frank Forza.
Okay.
But it's too long for me to tell right now. It's literally like a 35-minute story. And I know people will say that's crazy to have a story that long, but I'll say that to people who watch our show and who watch any of my personal stuff. I know that the world loves 60-second and 90-second and 2-minute videos. I know that that's most of the videos or whatever, 70, 75% of what the public consumes now, or, they love video and they love short videos, short and sweet. But I realize even when you and I do this podcast and even when I talk about things, it just takes me a while to get warmed up. My best stuff, anytime I did any podcast, the best stuff is always later in the game. It just never, I just don't come out of the gate with the fluff. And I know that you can hire editors and you can, get all the best stuff up early and tease things and this, that, and the other. A lot of work that I personally don't want to do right now. When we get the budget, we can do that, and we can maybe tease them with some better things on the front end of the first 30 seconds or so. But like that video, and we've done that here, that video really exemplifies where there's so many goodies and there's so many good thought-provoking moments in that video, but someone would have to sit through the first 5 minutes. Not that the first 5 minutes are boring, they're just not scintillating, they're not super tantalizing or super exciting, but they're necessary, almost like how you get a 3-hour movie, a 2.5-hour movie. A lot of times the first half hour is not that good because you got to kind of set it up, right? You got to give certain information out there to deepen, to get people emotionally attached to the character. So that video though is one of those where if you bear with it for the first 4 or 5 minutes, it heats up and it's worth the watch. And a lot of the stuff I do, at least, is like that. A lot of the best stuff and the best goodies are 30 minutes in, 40 minutes in, 45 minutes in. I don't watch Rogan very much. I see little clips here and there on the internet, and I guess here and there, once in a blue moon, I'll watch 1 or 2 minutes of it. But I wonder if the same is true for that show, where a lot of the best stuff is buried deeper in the episode.
So let me speak about that from a neuroscience perspective. And I know I'm always talking about neuroscience. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. Frank, when you're having as a content consumer, so someone who, someone from our who's from our audience, and if they follow us over time and they listen, what happens is, first off, they're developing an understanding of the language that we use and starting to relate to us in a very specific way. And that's to understand how we think. Since you and I started doing this podcast together, it's now over 6 months, that I've gotten to know you much better, even though it's been mostly through I've only seen you once in the last 6 months in person, and that was at a Whole Foods a couple times, but we didn't have that richness of conversation that we're having now. And so our brains are designed to follow along because we all want the story, we all want the narrative and the content we have. And so you're missing out in that development of where we are mentally in our give and take, the back and forth conversation we have and the flow. And it's good to not, it's good for you, for a viewer to see, as you develop your stories, and at the same time, they're having these other thoughts in the background of like, is Noah going to interrupt? Is Jordan going to interrupt? Is anyone going to interrupt? I hope they don't interrupt. Or, Or can someone cut off Frank, from his monologue here? There's a lot of chatter, mental chatter that the consumer goes, the content consumer goes through, and I would tell you that part of the richness of the experience for these podcasts, and definitely if you watch them on YouTube, because you need that input from our facial expressions, is to watch the whole thing. It's good for you to watch the whole thing.
We call this, in journalism parlance, we call it long form, right? Long form meaning, stories, magazine stories that are longer, and videos that are longer, maybe longer than 10 minutes. And the interesting thing is that, gosh, I just lost my train of thought because these guys are here. One second, Noah. Oh, you were talking about the richness of the experience. I've never liked small talk, really. So I've never, some people do. They like sort of that fluff stuff. I'm like you. I like the layers of things. And my brain is very active. I mean, it thinks, I like to think of 10 things at once and then make those 10 things have harmony, right? Pull them all together for some big takeaway. So I'm not saying that's always good. But we were saying, hold on, you were talking about the richness. That made me think of it. What were you saying before that? I apologize.
There's a harmonization. That's okay. I'm not affected whatsoever with what's going on behind the scenes there.
Yeah.
There's a harmonization of your mind, of your brain. This is like pure neuroscience. There's a harmonization effect that occurs where, as we get into these places in our discussion, we get into a space. It's a space. It's like if you have infinity and you can go down a path, in our minds, we get to a place in these conversations that help us know context. And it's the dialogue or the dialectic space that we find ourselves in. So
this is what I'm saying, Noah. So I would equate what we do and the long form and the value of the long form, the value of the video going longer, the podcast going longer, and it getting better with, say, jazz musicians, or even like a band like Queen or Dave Matthews, or even Luther Vandross, who I loved, and Fish, and these groups that just jam and they just freestyle. When I do music, I perform music too. When I do music, my best stuff far and away is just in the freestyle jam sessions. It's not in this is the way the song is supposed to be sung. I make my own music a lot of the time. And when I sing someone else's cover, I almost always change. I change the lyrics, I change the tempo, I change the way it's sung, I'll change the octaves, because I make it fit me. I make it fit what I feel. And so what I found is, even when I'm singing someone else's song and I change the song, I change the melody, I change the lyrics, my best stuff far and away is when we freestyle. We just did a cover of Thrill Is Gone by B.B. King. We did like probably a 9-minute version. There is some phenomenal stuff. It's not in the B.B. King original. We just go off script freestyle, and that's what you get when you just play around. All those extra goodies. Fish does it. I'm not a big Fish fan. My buddy loves Fish and travels them around the country to go see their concerts. He's like, these guys play and play and play, and they play 15-minute songs, 20-minute songs, and you don't even know what they're going to play next. You don't know what they're going to do next. And that's part of the glory of it. And some people are just so comfortable in that improvisation and that freestyling and in that. And a lot of times that's where you strike gold. You don't go in with a script, and you don't, but I can't guarantee, and you can't guarantee the viewer, that we're going to have them hooked in the first 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, even though we want to get better at that and we'll improve on that. I cannot guarantee and put all the pressure and say, it's just so important for us at a marketing vantage point to hit them upside the head in the first 5 minutes and make them watch and make them glued. I'm aware of that, but I'm not going to sell my soul just to be Mr. Hyperbole, pound the table and do that. And it might just seem insincere. It's not really me. I like to, it's like a date. I mean, if you have a date, you need to build up the date. You need to build up the mood. You don't just go in and be a gorilla. So for me, normally I like to build into that. I like to crescendo into that. And I like to go where in the momentness, even what we do here, in the momentness, where's the moment taking me? We can go off script. You maybe say something, I'm ready to go off script. I'm ready to blow up any script we had of any talking points. I'm ready to blow it up and say, okay, let's go in a whole other direction. And I think that that's beautiful. And I think, though, that that also can take a lot more time than someone who says, we have the script and the video is going to be 3 minutes and it's going to be really good. And we know that customers like these buzzwords, blah, 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 and we can plug our product and great, that's a wrap. And it's just not my deal. It's not my bag. It's not exciting. And it doesn't sort of fit that freestyle. By the way, the name Frank in the Germanic, right? The German tribes, it meant basically Frank was a way to refer to the Franks, which were free people. That meant free people. So Frank is synonymous with free Stalin. Anyway, Noah, it's getting late. We are Everyman BJJ. We are normally every Sunday, 1:30 Pacific time, 4:30 Eastern time, everymanbjj@gmail.com. We are missing our third wheel, Mr. Jordan Worth. He'll be back with us on Sunday. Noah, it is always a pleasure. I've enjoyed the conversation, and we will huddle again soon and solve the world's problems.
Likewise, Frank, I've enjoyed our conversation today. Another good one. I think this is going to be episode 28, but we'll see. All right, take care.
Thank you, brother.
Take care. Bye.